Bioweapons, my old friend, it's time to talk to you again. We've made previous videos on this topic, including gain-of-function gaslighting and gain-of-function garbage, and my husband Mark has covered it in several articles. We've pointed out that some of those promoting lab leaks and bioweapons may not be aware that the virologist claims have been dismantled and found to be fallacious. However, even in the health freedom community, many continue to ramp up the fear, asserting that not only do pathogenic viruses exist, but they are being engineered in labs.
In 1999, I was working in Fort Detrick in USAMRIID there, and my job was to teach Ebola how to infect human cells without killing them. Ebola couldn't infect human cells until we took it in the laboratories and taught him.
Unfortunately, this plays straight back into the hands of the fraudsters who staged COVID-19 and other fake pandemics. The belief in viruses and contagion more widely will continue to be used to keep the population in a state of confusion, anxiety, and susceptibility to control. So let's have another look at why bioweapons, as promoted, are nothing more than fairy tales with no basis in scientific reality.
But now the virus comes here and 2 kids die, and we could have stopped it right then and there, but we don't because we have to protect the perfect biological weapon. But then the virus mutates and we can't stop it now, and we could have then.
In 1999, Ken Allebeck published his book Biohazard, the chilling true story of the largest covert biological weapons program in the world. Allebeck was formerly known as Kanatsan Alebekov, and he claimed to have run top-secret biological weapons programs in the Soviet Union before defecting to the United States in 1992. Biohazard was promoted by the mainstream media, including the New York Times, and caused a stir of concern around the world. Allebeck claimed that he had worked on weaponization of smallpox, plague, Marburg virus, and anthrax. But what was the actual evidence for these alleged dangerous pathogens? In his book, he offers the convenient excuse that the records from a secret test facility on Rebirth Island no longer exist. But based on his stories, Allebeck made allies with US government officials as early as 1991 and became a consultant for intelligence agencies. However, by the early 2000s, some were starting to question his reports, particularly after he had publicly declared that there was, quote, no doubt that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. This narrative was of course false, but was one of the excuses used to launch another war in the Middle East. Additionally, it was revealed that Allebeck and the entities that hired him in the biodefense sector had received federal contracts totaling around $28 million. In other words, selling the fear of bioweapons was highly profitable for Allebeck, as documented by investigative journalist David Willman in a Los Angeles Times article circa 2007. Also, rather suspiciously, Allebeck had a generally favourable Wikipedia page, with the disinformation site actively promoting his various claims about bioweapons. Allebeck now works with a company called Locus Fermentation Solutions, but he recently appeared with Dr. Peter McCulloch in an interview about the origins of COVID-19. The pair promoted lab-engineered pathogens within the pseudoscientific paradigm of virology.
It was really clear that no one was really prepared for this to get outside the lab in Wuhan, China, maybe outside of Ralph Barrick and Vineet Menachery and Dr. Shingri Li. She's the bat lady. It's interesting, Ralph Barrick, who knows the most about coronaviruses probably in the entire United States or world, he should be on TV every night trying to help America get out of this mess. This guy is the quietest person in the world. You never hear from him.
That kind of talk would bring a smile to the face of globalist frontman Bill Gates, who can't even keep a straight face when trying to talk about imaginary bioweapons.
Bioweapons, that's a really bad thing, that we shouldn't have technology for that.
Alright, let's have a look at the actual science of bioweapons. One of the scariest narratives in the world of virology is Ebola, also known as Ebola hemorrhagic fever, with a supposed death rate of 50% and a massive Wikipedia page. This is something that they want you to know all about. In 2002, this paper titled Hemorrhagic Fever, Viruses as Biological Weapons appeared in the Journal of the American Medical Association. They claimed that Ebola viruses were on their watch list because of the following key features. 1. High morbidity and mortality. 2. Potential for person-to-person transmission. 3. Low infective dose and highly infectious by aerosol dissemination. 4. Effective vaccine unavailable or available only in limited supply.
Sponsored by Pfizer.
5. Potential to cause public and healthcare worker anxiety. 6. Availability of pathogen or toxin. 7. Feasibility of large-scale production. 8. Environmental stability. And 9. Prior research and development as a biological weapon. We'll see that of these, the only thing they have in reality is point 5, that is causing anxiety in people's minds who believe that bioweapons actually exist. Humorously, the paper cites Alabek's book Biohazard as evidence of bioweapons programs. But in order to have an actual Ebola bioweapon, you have to have a virus first. So let's have a look at the evidence on offer. The quote virus is alleged to be so infectious that coming into contact with any body fluid is enough to allow its transmission. However, despite this claimed infectiousness, the outbreaks are limited to small-scale sporadic occurrences in destitute West African countries, where there are many other environmental reasons why people get sick in clusters. At this point, you may see the Joker card in the form of a famous case, such as Geoffrey Platt. He was a British laboratory technician who was said to be the first incidence of Ebola in a first world country. In 1976, while working in the Porton Down Microbiological Research Lab, Platt pricked his thumb with a liver sample from a guinea pig said to be infected with the virus. Initially, they reported he was alert and did not seem to be particularly ill. However, over the next week, he developed all sorts of symptoms, including sweating, fevers, diarrhea and vomiting, altered mental state, and protein in his urine. It all sounds pretty dramatic and was put down to the quote virus that was attacking him. Except there's a bit more to consider with the story. First, there was no bleeding, so it wasn't a hemorrhagic fever. Second, if you read the quote treatments they were administering, you will see that not only did they give him 2 infusions of serum on days 3 and 6, but they were also injecting him with interferon twice daily for 14 days. Interferons are proteins that are known to cause all sorts of reactions in the body, including all of the ones that Platt displayed. This is classic allopathic medicine tunnel vision. First, assuming that a germ is causing every problem and not investigating other causes. And second, not pausing to think whether it may be the quote treatments that are in fact also causing some symptoms. The terror of being placed in an isolation unit and told that you have a deadly virus is also a sure way to cause distress. On a related note, the case report stated that of the 24 nurses who were directly concerned in the care of the patient, 6 became ill with acute respiratory infections, which lasted on average 2 days. 4 of the 5 doctors looking after the patient developed a flu-like illness, with some gastrointestinal symptoms, but the problems invariably resolved within 2 or 3 days. Again, nobody was experiencing hemorrhagic fevers, and it appeared to be anxiety manifesting as physical symptoms, precipitated by fear of deadly contagion. What about the alleged virological investigations in the Platt case? Strangely, the report claimed that a blood specimen was examined by electron microscopy and virus particles were seen, which were similar to those of Ebola virus. Virologists don't usually claim that they can see viruses directly in blood samples, so this is pretty dodgy, even on their own terms. Additionally, the patient Platt himself was a co-author in a 1977 Lancet publication that reported they required Vero cell cultures to produce these images of their claimed Ebola virus. The case report also mentioned, quote, guinea pig infective units in the virus isolation section, but did not detail the methodology. However, if we consult the just mentioned Lancet publication, we can see that they described injecting material from sick individuals into the abdominal cavities of young guinea pigs as a form of, quote, virus isolation. No control experiments were performed, and as you can see, our dozens of videos and articles covering the pseudoscience involved in virology's claims of isolation. I'd also recommend Mike Stone's recent article, The Ebola Virus, Part 1, on virology for a more detailed analysis of why no virus was isolated. In summary, regarding Ebola, no infectious agent has ever been shown to exist, unless you believe that injecting foreign biological material into other animals to cause various reactions in uncontrolled experiments is proof of a virus. Similarly, obtaining electron micrographs from uncontrolled experiments and declaring that some of them are viruses is also invalid. They have never been shown to be replication-competent infectious particles that can cause disease. And lastly, why does such an allegedly highly contagious disease never spread far? Answer: because Ebola viruses are phantom constructs that are not required to explain hemorrhagic fevers. Wait, some Ebola virus proponents might say, we've done other experiments to prove that we are dealing with a highly infectious and lethal virus. Like this 2015 paper titled Experimental Respiratory Infection of Marmosets with Ebola Virus. And here we go. The article opens with, Ebola virus causes a highly infectious and lethal hemorrhagic fever in primates with high fatality rates during outbreaks, and Ebola virus may be exploited as a potential biothreat pathogen. In the experiment, they claimed to have aerosolized Ebola viruses, which subsequently killed most of the marmosets. We know with virology publications that the most important part is the methodology, not the fanciful claims that come afterwards. They stated that their virus was provided by the Public Health Agency of Canada and then grown in vero monkey kidney cells. Then they sequenced their culture and, hey presto, found matching sequences to the reference genome on GenBank. We have covered this circular reasoning many times before, starting with genetic material claimed to be, quote, viral, and then detecting it again as not evidence of a virus. So with their mixture asserted to contain viruses, despite no evidence that particles fulfilling this description were in the mixture, they proceeded to the aerosol challenge. Did this involve spraying a mist of the alleged contagious agent into their cages? No. The marmosets were knocked out by injecting them with ketamine, and then they were forced to breathe in the mixture via a collision nebulizer for 10 minutes. They reported that most of the marmosets died after about a week, with the higher dose experiments killing them faster, which they attributed to the, quote, viral load. In fact, all they showed was that force nebulizing a biological brew into little monkeys for 10 minutes made them terminally toxic, and the more that was put into them, the faster they succumbed. This cannot be called a contagious entity, as it had to be pumped directly into their lungs and was never demonstrated to pass between animals. Furthermore, there was no control experiment where comparable monkeys were knocked out and assaulted by a similar nebulized biological brew forced into their lungs for 10 minutes, as well as being bled multiple times, being surgically implanted with recording devices, and being confined in isolation chambers. In other words, it wasn't a scientific experiment. It was another of virology's pointless animal massacres. Those who promote the bioweapon and lab leak narratives are falling for the headlines and parroting the claims of the virologists on face value. They may also want to pause and think why these stories are promoted by the mainstream media. This year we even had Tedros, the Director General of the WHO, lending his support to stories about the laboratory origin of COVID-19. And despite many people thinking this has been hushed up until recently, this sort of gaslighting for COVID has been going on since the beginning, when the lab leak theory was being splashed around in mainstream headlines. Then going back to 2017, we had Bill Gates advising the need for a ramped up biosecurity state based on fictional bioterrorism tales.
We also face a new threat that the next epidemic
has a good chance of originating on a computer screen of a terrorist intent on using genetic engineering to create a synthetic version of the smallpox virus or a contagious and highly deadly strain of flu. So the point is that we ignore the strong link between health security and international security at our peril. Whether it occurs by the quirk of nature or at the hand of a terrorist, epidemiologists show through their models that a respiratory spread pathogen would kill more than 30 million people in less than a year.
In fact, the wider bioweapons make-believe narrative has been pushed by Hollywood for decades. The 1995 film Outbreak was probably the best example. We had little monkeys, a mysterious deadly disease,
men wounded in battle we can deal with, but this strange disease.
top secret military men obtaining their bioweapon.
Hey, buddy, that's what we're here for. We're going to take you home. But first, we're going to take a little blood sample, all right?
I'm gonna die, right?
No, you're not going to die.
Some ridiculous kidney cell culture images.
These pictures were taken over a period of 8 hours, normal, healthy kidney cells before they meet the virus. In the space of an hour, a single virus has invaded, multiplied, and killed the cell.
And some even funnier microscopy scenes.
One goes in, millions come out. Every cell is dead. Now we see them individually, searching for the next victim.
Unfortunately, films such as this probably serve as predictive programming and make the unsuspecting public more likely to believe subsequent stories that appear in the media. Coming back a little closer to reality, what about the trail of, quote, coronavirus patents and grants being given for alleged gain-of-function research? In 2021, Dr. David Martin of MCAM International published the Fauci COVID-19 dossier. Some people mistook this for the smoking gun, that not only do the viruses exist as described, but they are also being engineered. In Mark's recent treatise, A Farewell to Virology, he points out that this can be dealt with by taking into account Dr. Martin's disclaimer at the start of the dossier. That is, throughout this document, uses of terms commonly accepted in medical and scientific literature do not imply acceptance or rejection of the dogma that they represent. Patent office staff and bureaucrats that approve grants don't need to understand biological reality and simply repeat the dogma of the virologists. As an analogy, if you patent a design for a flying carpet, it doesn't mean that you have a working model or can even produce a working model. The patents surrounding virology are constrained by biological and scientific laws, and we analyse their plausibility in the same way. Additionally, as I mentioned earlier, this bioweapon and biosecurity scam is a multi-billion-dollar business. So knowingly or not, those involved will act in a way to keep the gravy train going. Mark did a more detailed breakdown of the various bioweapon gaslighting narratives when he spoke for 2 hours with 21st Century Wire's Patrick Henningsen recently. He also joined Dr. Tom Cowan to dismantle some of the claims by prominent health freedom leaders concerning so-called engineered pathogens. I'll put links to those conversations in the show notes on my website. The bioweapon narrative relies on one thing, and that is getting the public to keep believing in both germ theory and the existence of viruses. Sure, there have been many attempts to make bioweapons, but there is no evidence of any contagious product that can pass from human to human. All they have are toxic products that can be injected into people or otherwise used to poison them through mechanisms that are not, quote, infections. A version of this was known centuries ago when castles and cities were attacked by putting corpses in their water sources. It was the breakdown products that were toxic, not the microbes. Even supposedly weaponized anthrax spores have a few question marks over them, as was explained in 2020 by Sally Fallon-Morell in her article Anthrax, Arsenic and Old Lace. Morell points out that alleged deaths from anthrax look suspiciously like arsenic poisoning, raising the possibility that weaponized anthrax actually contains chemical toxins. And once again, there is no transmission of anthrax between humans. The bioweapon myth is all about fear and hypnosis. scary stories to keep people in the narrative through emotion and distraction from the lack of actual evidence. It is the element of fear that makes people ignorant of how they are being manipulated. Once they see that the concept of pathogens are an illusion, they make a paradigm shift. Rather than outsourcing their health and community to globalists, politicians, and the medico-pharmaceutical industry, they take responsibility for their own well-being and never look back. Please share this video so we can shine light on this vital issue and help others achieve the same freedom. If you enjoyed this video, please visit supportdrsam.com